gentlemen, we will shortly be landing at Glasgow Airport. Can I ask you to fasten your seatbelts?
I don't know why they keep calling it Glasgow Airport. It's closer to Paisley than to Glasgow. It's practically inside the Paisley borough boundary. Anyway, everybody in the world has heard of Paisley. The Paisley pattern, the Paisley shawl, thread capital of the world. There used to be people who didn't know the Paisley pattern actually came from a town called Paisley, in Scotland. The River Clyde goes on up to Glasgow, but Paisley comes first. 100 years ago, Benjamin Disraeli came out with the immortal phrase, "Keep your eye on Paisley." Prime ministers knew what they were talking about in those days, for this is no ordinary town. It's the biggest town in Scotland if you don't count the cities. Nearly 100,000 people live here. It was the thread capital of the world for 150 years, has had a grammar school since 1586, was the first town in the world to have a filtered water supply in the whole world. If you come from Paisley, you're known as a buddy. Not American buddy, but a Paisley buddy. And it goes for both men and women. It had to. When the thread mills were at their peak, there were so many women working in Paisley, it was said the town had 7 women for every man. Oh, it was always a great place, Paisley. In the 6th century, St. Myrn arrived, a wandering Irish missionary. He built a church near the little hamlet of Paisley. But the town really got going when the abbey was built over 800 years ago. Sited at the lowest point, the River Cart could be forded. King David I had brought a lot of Norman knights north to train the Scottish soldiery. He gave the land around here to Walter FitzAlan, who was actually a Breton like Robert the Bruce. FitzAlan gave land for a monastery to the Cluniac order, whose motto was, "To work is to pray." The abbot and his monks came up from Shropshire in England. They were very popular locally, and not just because they educated the people and taught them crafts like weaving. They used to come across the Cart for convivial nights in a small inn at the foot of what is now Cossyside Street. Sir William Wallace, the Scottish patriot, was educated at the Abbey. He was the one who started the job of getting the English off Scotland's back. It was never easy. The English executed Sir William and burned down the Abbey, but still it was to become known as the cradle of the Stuart kings. And that dynasty had its beginnings here. This is where Marjorie Bruce was killed falling off her horse. Her son, born posthumously, became Robert II, first of the Stuart kings. Since Paisley owed its very existence to the Abbey, when the Reformation came to Scotland, Paisley preferred to stick with Rome. The town was 12 years later than the rest of Scotland in getting its first Protestant minister. The second one didn't last long. He asked for a transfer because of the Paisley people's contempt for discipline, their manifest vices, their menacing and boasting. Much later, a town provost said the local character was flawed by a weakness for erotic adventure. But we've put all that behind us. Still, even the bleakest history has a way of working out best for Paisley. It's a fact that 300 years ago, burning witches led to the first big step forward in Paisley's textile history. It's all there in the records. 4 witches and 2 male warlocks were burned alive to cure a local girl called Christian Shaw of fits and mad spells. It worked. Overnight, she became a serious young woman. She went to Europe and infiltrated the Dutch thread industry, stealing plans of their machines and smuggling bits back to Johnson, where she set up a thread factory. Within 40 years, there were 93 thread-making businesses in Paisley. It was easy for people with that kind of spirit to copy an original shawl design brought back from the Middle East by Scottish regiments who'd been in the Napoleonic Wars. It's called the pine pattern from the Kashmir. Paisley weavers could copy anything. It took a weaver and his family 6 months to make a shawl. The price was £20. By 1834, the town was making £1 million a year from shawls, and there were 7,000 weavers in Paisley. This is a weaver's house, the thatched cottage of Robert Tannahill, Paisley's best-known poet. He kept sheets of paper on a stand beside his loom. His most famous song was "Thou Bonny Wood o' Craigie Lee." Then his publishers rejected his second volume, his girlfriend betrayed him, and accusing his friends of plotting against him, he burned his poems and took a fatal fall into the Candron burn. The old weavers were independently minded men, well-read and extremely radical, so much so that the district of Charleston used to be known as the Republic. In 1819, in a trade recession, the weavers rioted so successfully that the cavalry had to be brought in, not from Fort Laramie, but from Glasgow. Take the case of Alexander Wilson, a typically radical weaver. In 1793, he joined in a weaver's dispute, writing a satirical poem against a hated employer known as the Shark. They found him guilty of libel, put him in prison, and made him burn a copy of his poem. This sickened him of Paisley, and he emigrated. He was to pioneer American ornithology with his brilliant illustrations and die a famous man in Philadelphia. In the 19th century, Paisley had so many slumps there was a time when the whole town went bankrupt for 20 years. Patrick Clark saved the town by taking American cotton and twisting it into a strong thread. Brother James thought up the idea of small wooden bobbins. In 1834, James Coates started the Fergus Lee mills. The small weavers might have survived against industrialization, but the new jacquard looms arrived from Belgium, and only the big weavers could afford them. New techniques could produce a Paisley shawl so cheaply the mill girls could afford to buy one. This, of course, killed it for the ladies of fashion. But Paisley folk have survived the worst before now, even if they are full of menacing and boasting and erotic adventure. Coates and Clark, the honourable families, mill owners and philanthropists. Ingenuity and Paisley know-how made them multimillionaires, and nobody is ever going to be allowed to forget it. The George A. Clark Town Hall, a gift to the town from a famous son who had been running the family mills in America. Paradoxically, when such monuments to Victorian capitalism were being built, Paisley had its most shameful era. The river and the burns were polluted, and Paisley was described as the dirtiest and most unhealthy town in Scotland. The Thomas Coates Memorial Baptist Church took 12 years to build at a cost of over £1 million. At the same time, Paisley's housing was so deplorable that the editor of the Paisley Daily Express, never an organ of rampant radicalism, was moved to say, "It seems a wonder that none of the rich philanthropists who have done so much to honour Paisley should not have attempted to remedy the existing state of matters as regards the dwelling of the poor." That was all a long time ago, and now the past has its place safely enshrined in the museum. Another gift from the families and paid for by the mills. And as the mills contract more and more, it is the monuments they paid for that serve to keep their memory alive. For Paisley was never exclusively a mill town. Even in the Victorian heyday, the mills and the institutions they built were not the only Paisley institutions or the only Paisley life. The Bull Inn at the top of New Street, probably Paisley's most famous pub. Many a lad had his first drink there and was about to have his second when the late proprietress, a Miss Jean McKinnon, told him to go away home and save his money. She thought nothing of showing the door to great big sober off-duty policemen laughing too loudly at golfing stories. Still, it was a man's pub. No lady, woman or girl child has ever had a drink in here. So, for the first time, the women of Paisley can see what they are missing. The bull is run like a gentleman's club, and rightly so. For Paisley folk are great joiners of clubs and lodges and branches and societies. And for every group there is a photograph and a place on the wall. Aye, if it's been hatched, matched or dispatched, it'll be in the Paisley Daily Express. This is the original Daily Express, a great deal older than its pale national copy. There are 34,000 homes in Paisley, and the editor of the Paisley Daily Express knows that every line he prints will be read in most of them. Ice rink supermarket would be death blow. Buses halted in biggest freeze for 54 years. Man punched. Kick police. For sale turquoise rug, £10 or nearest offer. Man accused of stealing doll. St. Mirren starts season on brighter note. Youth through beer can at bus. Strong winds buffet Paisley. New look saints pay for lack of experience. A Paisley man dead in Wellington, New Zealand. A Paisley baby born in Melbourne, Australia. Paisley, Canada, celebrates its centenary. For 100 years, the Wee Express has been telling it as it is. Read all about it. Read all about it. Invention wins Paisley firm £90,000 order. Export sales ensure full employment at Chrysler's, says sales director. The decline of the mills was supposed to bring Paisley to its knees. But, as always with Paisley, things didn't quite work out that way. For a start, it ignored the local talent for putting the magic into bottles of the ability of Brown and Paulson to sell baby food to the Italians by the 2 million jar load. Even the Swiss, with the kind of good sense you'd expect of them, are pouring in the millions to make Paisley the pigmentation capital of the world. Paisley can take it. Already it boasts the biggest all-food warehouse in Europe within its boundaries. And an Anglo-Dutch oil giant has looked at the old immigrant town and found that its unrivaled communications makes it the ideal centre for controlling their interests in Scottish oil. Its top executives will be buddies before the year is out. So successful are the new industries that Paisley has the second lowest level of unemployment in Scotland. Only oil and fish-rich Aberdeen can employ more of its people. It's a situation not without its ironies for the Paisley buddies. For a start, you get fewer boys standing at the cross than you used to. The Bonnie Wee Well, most famous of all Paisley landmarks. The Bonnie Wee Well in the breast of the brae, where the hare steals to drink and the gloamin' sae grey, where the wild moorland birds dip their nebs in tick-wing, and the lark weets his whistle ere mounting to sing. Half the town thinks the poem is by Tannahill, but Hugh MacDonald was the author. A Glasgow man, unfortunately. Another Paisley landmark, Largs on the Firth of Clyde, Paisley by the sea, and beyond it, Millport on the Isle of Cumbrae, out in the estuary, the treasure island of childhood. The buddies didn't escape from Paisley on holiday, they took Paisley with them, by Clyde steamer, and they journeyed to Largs and Millport, Rothsay and Dunoon. If you went somewhere else, you might have to spend your holidays with strangers. The fun lasted one fortnight, the duration of the Paisley Fair, the first 2 weeks in August.
Yet will
has never been what you might call a blind faith. With each wave of immigration, different forms of worship sprang up in almost every corner. Congregations were always having schisms on theological niceties. One new breakaway church was so strictly faithful, it excommunicated 50% of its own membership in its very first year. Paisley has attracted people from all over. The building of the Glasgow-Johnson Canal brought in the Irish. Highland scab and Highland hunger brought them down to escape the clearances and famine in the glens. But Paisley folk are not known for their bigotry. As the police inspector 100 years ago or so said, the Irish are no more troublesome than the Highlanders. Oh yes, there's a lot going on in Paisley that a tourist would never guess at after a quick dash round the Abbey. It's not so long ago the town had a Wild West flavour on market day, when cattle were driven up Well Meadow. Paisley has had a market for 500 years. The people of nearby Renfrew resented it, so they came one night when the market cross was being built and smashed it down. Paisley won in the end. Who could put anything over on men like these? Bonnie Prince Charlie tried. He kidnapped 2 Baileys and asked the town for £1,000 to get them back. The town leaders beat him down to 500.
Brian Newland Baxter.
The Paisley College of Technology, modestly founded on grants of cash and land from local trusts and industry, has grown to occupy a 13-acre complex in the heart of the town and expanded its work and interests far beyond local needs.
David John McGuire. Maged Matwally.
Matthew Thompson.
Oh, aye. We've heard about Paisley in all the best places.
Thomas Anderson Whiteside. With honours, 3rd class, John Francis Henvey.
We'll be out in a minute, folks. We just got away in time. "70 years ago, we could not have shown this view of the Abbey. The place of Paisley had become the town's worst slum, a haunt of rogues and vagabonds with a pub doing a roaring trade in the abbot's old kitchen. It's as well to remember our history, even the murkier bits. Maybe it's not the stuff of kings and wars and high affairs of state. Maybe it has more to do with bobbins and mill girls and witches and trade riots and struggling poets throwing themselves into buns. Men standing for what they believed in. And there can be pride in that too. For it is the history of the people of Paisley. The people who made Paisley the town that it is. One of the most uniquely independent and successful towns Scotland has ever produced. The place to keep your eye on.